All right, so today we're diving into something a little bit provocative, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Machiavellianism.
It's
Have you ever heard that term before?
oh yeah, it's a very loaded term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna unpack it and
I think people will be surprised by
yeah.
how much it's at play in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a really fascinating one because it kind of gets at this question of like, do the ends justify the means?
Exactly.
And I think we'll see that it's very much a spectrum,
Yeah.
and
It's not a
yeah.
black and white thing.
No, not at all.
No.
And so we're really talking about Machiavelli's The Prince, right? That's kind of the
That's right.
that's the source material that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean that's the text that everyone knows Machiavelli for.
Right.
But it's important to remember that, The Prince was written as a guide for rulers
Yeah.
in a very specific historical context.
Yes. Yeah.
So, we have to be careful about applying his advice
Right.
directly to our own lives.
Right. It wasn't meant to be a self-help book,
No.
like how to get ahead in your relationships or at work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with that said, I mean, let's kind of just dive right in.
Yeah.
What are we really talking about when we say Machiavellian or Machiavellianism? Like, how would you define that?
Well, at its core, I would say Machiavellianism is about prioritizing power
Okay.
above all else.
Okay.
It's a very pragmatic approach.
Okay.
And it's one where, morality and ethics sort of take a back seat
Interesting.
to the goal of achieving and maintaining control.
So it's like less about what's right and wrong and more about what's effective.
Exactly. It discards, those idealistic notions of good and bad
Okay.
in favor of, what actually gets results.
So instead of thinking about how people should behave,
Yeah,
it's more about recognizing how they actually do behave.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very sort of, it's about, looking at the world through a very clear-eyed lens.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could play out in like high stakes environments, like
Oh, absolutely.
politics or business, where
Yeah.
the stakes are really high.
Yeah, I mean, a classic example of this is, Otto von Bismarck,
Oh, yeah.
who used what's called realpolitik to unify Germany.
Right.
And, he was someone who was not afraid to, make alliances with people that he personally disliked.
Right.
Or even, provoke wars if it ultimately served his goals.
Wow.
And that's,
So this is Machiavellianism on like a geopolitical stage.
exactly.
So-
Realpolitik is basically saying, ideals are nice,
Right.
but let's focus on what actually works.
Right. Results oriented.
Exactly.
Okay. And we see that in the corporate world too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
With,
You see it in things like hostile takeovers,
right.
where, companies will, prioritize profit over, say, employee well-being.
Yeah.
Or, those CEOs who are very charming and charismatic in public.
Right. But then they're ruthless behind closed doors.
Yeah. Okay. So those are pretty dramatic examples, though.
Sure.
What about like the rest of us, like
Yeah.
those of us who aren't running countries or corporations?
Right.
Is there such a thing as like everyday Machiavellianism?
Yeah, I think there is.
Okay.
I mean, the thing about Machiavellianism is it's not inherently good or evil.
Okay.
It's a tool,
Right.
like a hammer. You
Okay.
can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use it to cause damage.
Right.
So, the important part is understanding how it works.
Okay. So a little bit of this strategic thinking could actually be helpful
Yeah.
in our like personal and professional lives.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it in terms of like negotiation.
Okay.
Let's say you're trying to convince your landlord to make repairs.
Okay.
Understanding their motivations and using that knowledge to try to persuade them.
Right.
That's a form of Machiavellianism.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So is there a danger to this everyday Machiavellianism?
Yeah.
It seems like it could easily slip into manipulation.
Well, that's right. And that's why it's so crucial to understand, the ethical implications here.
Okay.
Machiavelli himself argued that, it's important for rulers to appear virtuous.
Right.
But he also emphasized, achieving your goals,
Right.
even if it meant, using deception.
So a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it's about understanding power dynamics.
Right.
On the other hand, it's very easy to see how these tactics could be used,
Right.
for personal gain at the expense of others.
Right. And that's where it gets, I think, a little bit tricky.
It does.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we should definitely explore a bit further.
Yeah.
Because it makes you think about those people in your life who just seem to have this knack
Yeah.
for getting what they want.
Oh, yeah.
And you wonder, like, how are they doing that? And maybe they're not consciously
Right.
using Machiavellian tactics, but they certainly seem to have
Figured it out.
figured out how to.
They've got a good intuitive grasp of these dynamics.
Yeah, okay, so I'm definitely seeing people in a new light now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we recognize...
That's a great question.
Yeah, how do we recognize when these tactics are being used on us?
Yeah, that's something we should definitely dig into.
Yeah.
But before we go there,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to understand,
Okay.
the potential downsides of this mindset.
Okay.
So I think we need to talk about the dark side of Machiavellianism,
Okay, let's do it.
how it can erode trust
Okay.
and even, be linked to
Yeah.
some, let's say, less desirable personality traits.
Okay. All right, so let's get into that then.
Yeah, let's do it.
After the break.
That's good.
All right, so we're talking about the dark side of Machiavellianism.
Yeah.
What are we really talking about here?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms of Machiavellianism is that it can foster a very cynical view of humanity.
Okay.
If you operate under the assumption that everyone is inherently selfish and untrustworthy,
Yeah.
it becomes very difficult to build genuine connections.
So basically, you're always on guard,
Right.
expecting people to betray you.
Exactly. You're constantly looking for the angle.
Right.
You're trying to figure out, what's in it for them.
Right.
And that kind of mindset can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
How so?
If you treat everyone like a potential enemy,
Yeah.
they're less likely to treat you with trust and respect.
Right, so it kind of creates this negative spiral.
Exactly. It erodes the foundation of those relationships.
Yeah, because if you don't have that trust,
Yeah,
it's really hard to build anything meaningful.
absolutely. It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
Right. Eventually, the whole thing collapses.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one potential pitfall.
Oh, yeah.
What else should we be aware of when it comes to this dark side?
Well, remember how we talked about the dark triad of personality traits?
Yeah.
Machiavellianism is one point on that triangle,
Okay.
alongside narcissism and psychopathy.
Ooh, that's a pretty unsettling combination.
It's not a great mix.
No, so what does that actually look like in a person?
Well, individuals who score high in Machiavellianism
Yeah.
are often very skilled manipulators.
Okay.
They can be very charming and charismatic,
Right.
but they use those qualities to exploit others.
For their own personal gain.
Exactly. It's like they're playing a game
Right.
that everyone else isn't even aware of.
It's like they're playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers.
Exactly. And because they lack empathy
Right.
and they prioritize their own needs above all else,
Yeah.
they can inflict a lot of damage
Right.
without even realizing it.
So it's not that they're necessarily like evil or malicious.
Correct.
It's more like they're just operating on a completely different
Yeah.
moral wavelength.
Exactly. They have a different set of rules that they're playing by.
Right. And those rules don't necessarily take into account the well-being of others.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a little bit scary.
It can be.
Yeah. But here's the thing that I'm kind of grappling with.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this dark side,
Yeah.
but you also mentioned earlier that
Yeah.
there are times when these Machiavellian traits,
Right.
like decisiveness or strategic thinking or a willingness to take risks,
Yeah.
can actually be used for good.
Exactly.
So are you saying that there are situations where being Machiavellian
I think so.
is actually justified?
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. Imagine you're a doctor
Okay.
working in a war zone.
Okay.
You have limited resources.
Right.
And you have to make really tough choices
Yeah.
about who gets treated first.
Yeah. Life or death decisions.
Exactly, in that kind of high-pressure environment.
Yeah.
A purely idealistic approach
Yeah.
might not be the most effective.
Right. You can't save everyone. So being able to prioritize and make those tough decisions,
Yeah,
even if they're unpopular,
right.
could actually save lives.
Exactly.
Okay. I see what you mean.
Or think about a whistleblower
Okay.
who exposes corruption within a company.
Right.
They might have to use some Machiavellian tactics.
Okay.
Deception, manipulation, even breaking the rules.
To achieve a greater good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To bring the truth to light.
So it sounds like it really comes down to context.
So
The same traits that could be harmful in one situation
right.
could actually be beneficial in another.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we navigate that?
Well, I think the key is self-awareness.
Okay.
You need to understand your own motivations,
Right.
your own tendencies,
Yeah.
and where you draw the line ethically.
Because without that self-awareness, it's
Yeah.
easy to slip from being strategically savvy
Correct.
to being a full-blown manipulator.
Exactly. It's like walking a tightrope.
Okay.
You need to be very aware of your balance
Yeah.
and constantly making adjustments.
To stay on the right side of that line.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get a clearer picture of this whole Machiavellian idea.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding the tools of power,
Right.
recognizing the potential for harm,
Yeah.
and then deciding how and when to wield them ethically.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot
Okay,
between pragmatism and morality.
I like that.
That point where you can be effective without compromising your integrity.
And that brings us back to, I think, one of Machiavelli's most controversial statements,
Yeah.
which is that it's better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both.
Right.
How do we reconcile that idea
Yeah.
with everything that we've just been talking about?
Well, remember, Machiavelli was writing for rulers in a very different time.
Right.
But I think even today, there's a certain truth to that statement.
I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with that, because
Yeah.
doesn't that go against everything we know about
Yeah.
building trust and fostering collaboration?
Well, here's the thing. It's not about choosing fear over love.
It's about recognizing that power dynamics are always at play.
Okay.
And sometimes a firm hand is necessary
Okay.
to maintain order and achieve your goals.
So it's not about being a tyrant.
Right.
It's about understanding when to assert yourself,
Exactly.
even if it makes you unpopular.
Right. Think about a manager who has to make tough decisions about layoffs.
Okay.
You know, if they let their emotions get in the way,
Yeah.
they might make choices that ultimately harm the company as a whole.
So in that situation, being able to make the hard call,
Yeah.
even if it makes people afraid of them,
Right.
might actually be the most responsible thing to do.
Exactly.
Okay, I see your point.
But here's the key.
Yeah.
Even when you need to be firm,
Yeah.
you can still be fair and respectful.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance
Exactly.
between firmness and compassion.
Exactly. And that's where self-awareness comes in again.
Right.
You need to be able to read the room,
Yeah.
understand the power dynamics.
And adjust your approach accordingly.
Okay, so we've talked about the dark side of Machiavellianism,
We have.
the potential for manipulation, the ethical dilemmas.
Yeah.
But let's flip the script for a moment.
Okay.
What about the positive aspects of this philosophy?
Yeah.
What can we learn from Machiavelli
Yeah.
that can actually help us in our lives?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so we've looked at that dark side and even talked about times when maybe, some Machiavellian tactics might be the best choice.
Yeah.
But I'm curious now about, are there things that we can learn from this philosophy that are actually beneficial?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I mean, one of Machiavelli's greatest strengths, I would say, was his pragmatism.
Okay.
He encouraged a focus on understanding reality as it is,
Okay.
not as we wish it to be.
So being realistic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that's incredibly valuable,
Okay.
even if you don't subscribe to, his more ruthless tactics
So instead of getting caught up in ideals. Right.
or wishful thinking. We can benefit from being more realistic about how the world actually works.
Exactly. It's about being able to analyze situations objectively,
Okay.
assess the power dynamics,
Yeah.
and then make strategic decisions
Yeah.
based on that understanding.
Sometimes we get so focused on what should be
Right.
that we kind of ignore what is.
Exactly.
And then we end up, frustrated or
But-
disappointed.
Exactly. And, Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of adaptability.
Okay.
He understood that the world is constantly changing,
Right.
and those who can adjust their strategies to fit the circumstances
Right.
are more likely to succeed.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in today's world, where things are moving so quickly.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, we need to be able to think on our feet,
Right.
pivot when necessary.
Yeah.
Clinging rigidly to a plan that's no longer working
Right.
is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit of that Machiavellian cunning
Yeah.
could actually help us be more resilient.
More resourceful.
You got it. And, another thing that Machiavelli really emphasized was the importance of decisiveness.
Okay.
He understood that, hesitation and indecision
Yeah.
can be fatal,
Okay.
especially in situations where power is at stake.
So sometimes it's better to make a decision even if it's not perfect
Right.
than to kind of get stuck in that analysis paralysis.
Exactly. Machiavelli believed that fortune favors the bold.
Okay.
Of course, he wasn't advocating for reckless behavior.
Right.
He believed in careful planning and strategic thinking.
Yeah.
But he also understood that sometimes you just need to take action.
It makes me think about all those times when I've hesitated to go after something that I really wanted,
Yeah.
or I've second-guessed myself and missed an opportunity.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah.
But, maybe those experiences can be reframed as
Yeah.
opportunities to learn and grow,
Okay.
to become more decisive and more confident in our actions.
I like that.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the value in this, in taking a more pragmatic, adaptable,
Yeah.
and decisive approach to life.
Exactly.
But it's still hard to reconcile those ideas
Yeah.
with all the ethical concerns that we talked about earlier.
It is. It's all about finding that balance.
Right.
That sweet spot where you can be effective without compromising your values.
Right.
And that's not always easy,
Yeah.
but I think the key is to be intentional about how we use these tools.
Okay.
It's about understanding the potential downsides,
Right.
but also recognizing that, Machiavellianism in its essence
Okay.
is about understanding power
Yeah.
and using it strategically.
And having that knowledge can actually be a really good thing.
It can be incredibly valuable,
Yeah.
even if you choose to use it, for good.
So it's not about becoming a Machiavellian mastermind.
Right.
It's about taking those insights
Right.
and applying them in a way that aligns with our own personal ethics.
Exactly. It's about, learning from the past.
Yeah.
Understanding the present
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to navigate the future
I like that.
more effectively.
Yeah, that's a great point to end on.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground today.
we have.
From the historical context of Machiavelli's work
Yeah.
to, the very practical implications of his ideas in our own lives.
Exactly.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
I agree.
And I hope that it's given you listening out there some new things to think about.
Yeah, I think, ultimately, the question of how to balance pragmatism and morality is one that each of us has to answer for ourselves.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not about giving you a set of rules to follow.
Right.
It's about encouraging you to think critically,
Exactly.
make your own informed choices.
You got it.
So as you go back out into the world, keep those Machiavellian principles in mind,
Yeah.
but always remember to use them wisely, ethically,
Right.
and in a way that aligns with your own values.
Well said.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring
Keep questioning.
and keep diving deep.